guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Tomilola. This is part 2 of sharing my struggles with infertility. In the previous video, I think we stopped at where we made a decision to use my sister's eggs for IVF. While we're about to start that process, I got a call from the surgical gynecologist in Vancouver. At this point, it was about almost like a 2 years wait, and the doctor and the gynecologist said, "We have an appointment for you." And they gave me a date, and I said yes to the date because you never say no to a date because you don't know when you see a date. But I wasn't sure we're going to go through with the date. I had about a month before we're going to go before the date, so I wasn't really sure that we're going to go through that date because we were planning to do IVF, and we were planning to do IVF with the first doctor that we spoke to, who told us that that would be the best route for us to use donor eggs. And then I started searching for a fourth opinion. I wanted to see a fourth reproductive endocrinologist, and I found this lady, and I don't know why, but I emailed her and I said, "I know that my situation does not seem favorable and doesn't seem good, but I have faith, and I want a doctor who has faith too." And about a week later, I got a call. We scheduled an appointment to see her. When we went into the office, I'm not going to lie, it wasn't a pre-test office. We had gone to so many doctors' offices, and one thing about Toronto fertility clinics is that they are posh, they're nice. And for some reason, going to this clinic, it wasn't what I was used to, it wasn't fancy. And we were in the waiting room, and I told my husband, "We're not going to use this lady, that we're already here," because I wasn't feeling the vibe. And we spoke to this lady, and the way she addressed us, she wasn't overly friendly, but there was empathy in her voice. And she said to me, "I think that we should try IVF with your own eggs. I think that we're only going to get one embryo, but you're young." At that point, I was 31. You're young, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And yes, you don't have a lot of eggs left, but we should get at least one good egg from you. So I then told her I have this surgery. The doctor, the gynecologist in Vancouver, has called to remove the cyst. And she said, "Okay, go ahead and remove the cyst. I support you removing the cyst." And I said, "Wouldn't that affect our chances?" She said, "Maybe, maybe not, but I think that we have a better chance at a successful IVF if we take out the cyst." And then she said, "Who is the doctor doing who is the gynecologist in Vancouver?" And I told her the doctor's name, and she said, "His name sounds familiar." She asked me for his first name. I didn't know his first name, but then I guess I checked my email and I saw it. And she goes, "Oh wow, I went to school with him." She said, "If there's anybody I would trust to do this type of work, it would be, Dr. S." And I said, "Okay." And then she gave us the cost breakdown, and it was still high, but it was not anywhere close to $60,000. And so she said, so we left her, and at this point we had about 2 weeks to the surgery. So we left the office, and my husband was like, "I like her," and I was like, "I like her too." And so we flew to Vancouver, and we had the surgery. When I woke up from the surgery, I was very messed up, and the doctor left me. The gynecologist had left. The surgeon had left, but they left me a note, and I couldn't decipher the note. I couldn't really understand the note. So I gave it to a nurse, and I said, can you read what he said in the note?" Well, he left my husband the note, so my husband was one who we were trying to kind of decode what the note said. Now, if you know doctors' handwritings, I mess, you just don't know what they're writing. And so the nurse read it, and she said, "Okay, so he said the surgery went well. Your right fallopian tube was blocked and was still blocked, and unfortunately is now damaged. Your right ovary, the cyst had damaged your right ovary, so lost my right ovary and my right fallopian tube as well. And I just broke down because we didn't have enough, I don't have enough eggs and only one ovary. It's kind of like I said okay. And then I went home. We had to fly back from Vancouver to Toronto about 48 hours after the surgery. And I remember the night that we got back, I just cried. I put on some praise and worship music and I cried. But in this time, I had a little faith. I wasn't as angry as God anymore. So I said, okay, God, you're making this situation so bad because you're about to show up in a way that I could not have planned this. I said, okay, let's go, God. And so I had to rest for 8 weeks. So 8 weeks post surgery, I wasn't allowed to do anything. Once my 8 weeks was up, I called my fertility doctor, the new one, Dr. K, and Dr. K said, okay, when the first day of your cycle, when it comes, call me, we'll call the office, and then we will start the process of IVF. When we're about to pay for the IVF, I called my sister because my faith dwindled, and I said, can I still use your eggs? And she said, of course you can. And then she said, why do you want to use my eggs and not your own eggs? I thought you decided to use your eggs. I said, because we can only afford one round of IVF. And if this doesn't work, I have nothing. I have no money to go another round with your eggs. So let's just go with what we know is certain, what we know will work. And so my sister said, you know that my eggs are your eggs, but you don't want my eggs. So we're going to have to trust God. If this round does not work, I will give you my eggs. I will find the money. You should go with your eggs. You should try. So I said, okay. The first day of my cycle came, I called. I think day 3, I went to the hospital, which is where you start to do your cycle monitoring. So I was going to the hospital with IVF. I was going to the hospital every 2 days. Now, let me explain in brief summary what IVF is. So IVF is in vitro fertilization. In a regular unassisted reproduction, husband and wife have sex. Husband's sperm travels down, meets the wife's eggs, they fertilize it, and then they have a baby. With every month you produce follicles, and then you have one of those follicles mature. In very rare cases, you have 2 mature. That's when you have twins that are not identical. But normally it's one that matures in every cycle. With IVF, they're going to give you injections, and those injections are to make so many follicles mature. Essentially, it's a numbers game. They want to get as many eggs out of you, because with IVF there's something called attrition rate. You can start with a particular number but expect to lose 50 to 75% of what you start with at every stage in the process. So you want to start with a large number. That is the best case scenario. And so we started taking the injections. Now, for a regular woman who has regular ovarian reserve, one ovary would have about 10 to 16 follicles. So if you have 2 ovaries, you would have about 32 follicles in a cycle. If you are a regular woman with a regular egg count, with a good AMH. So we went for the cycle monitoring. They could see 6 follicles on me. And remember, I only have 1 ovary. So they could see 6 follicles. And you know what I said? God worked with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. Like, I'm pretty sure he can work with 7, he can work with 6. So let's go. I kept on injecting myself. My husband injected, well, I didn't inject myself. My husband gave me every single injection. My husband injected me, and then we would keep going to the hospital. We went to the hospital a couple of days later, and they were like, oh, right now it's 6 follicles. They can see 1 of them maturing. The goal is to get those 6 to mature, or at least 5 of those 6 to mature. So we did that. So I was happy. One follicle is maturing, gonna pump. They increase my dosage for the medication, gonna pump me up with more injections. So we started doing we continued with the injections, and then we went back to the hospital, and then they said, "Wow, they don't know what happened, but out of the 6 follicles, I only had 3 follicles, and none of them were maturing." I said, "What happened to the remaining 3?" They said sometimes they can just sort of dissipate or something. So I only had 3 follicles left, and none of them were maturing. And at this point, I'd been on days of taking this injection. And then on top of that, I developed a cyst again in the ovary. So there was some growth, and then the ultrasound technician said this does not look good. They might have to cancel my cycle. So essentially, it's canceling your cycle is you've wasted all your time. It means they can't proceed further because it's not going to yield a good result. So they said they were going to cancel my cycle, and I remember from the hospital back home, I just cried. I just cried the entire time. My husband, I didn't even look at him because he was driving, but I could hear him sniffing. We didn't say anything to each other. We were just crying. And then when I got home, I couldn't pray, so I put a note in my note app, and I essentially told God that I don't know if you're alive. I can't see you, but if you're alive, I'm going to need you to show up. I'm going to need you to show up. And so my doctor called me, and she said, it doesn't look good, but we're going to let's proceed. Let's take the injection for 2 more days. If it doesn't work out in the next 2 days, then we will cancel the cycle. And so we did 2 days later. We went to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, they said, "Wow, we're seeing 8 follicles, and 3 of them are maturing." I was like, "What?" I was like, "God, thank you." And so the doctor was like, "Let us wait a little bit. Let's inject you again." So I went again. 2 days later, they said 10 follicles, and 4 of them are maturing. And so my doctor was like, "Let's call it," because 4 were maturing, 6 were not maturing as fast. Now you need all of them to mature at the exact same time, because if one matures, it will get too big. It's going to be useless. It needs to be a particular size. And so my doctor said, "Let's call it." And so I did something called a trigger shot. A trigger shot is something you do 36 hours before you go for your egg retrieval. And so 36 hours later, I went to the hospital early in the morning, and I had my eggs retrieved. I was put under. So when you wake up, there's this recovery room. They demarcate it by almost like a curtain, so you can hear other people, but you can't see them. And so I'm all like dripped up, and lying and sitting down, and then the nurse or somebody comes to me and is like, "We were able to get 4 eggs out of you." And I was like, "Okay, I already kind of knew that was what we were going to get." And my doctor had told me that we would end up with 1 embryo, that she doesn't expect us to end up with more than 1 embryo. So while I was there, like, okay, no problem, 4 eggs, that's fine. Then the nurse went to meet the lady beside me, but there was a curtain, I couldn't see her. And they said, "We're still counting the number of eggs that you have, but right now we're on number 21, so this is looking good." I just broke down crying, because I was like, 21, 21, 21 eggs. I cried. I couldn't clean my eyes because I was so weak, so my husband was drying my tears for me. And then what happens is, my husband then drops sperm, and then they mix it in the lab. They'll call you in 24 hours. In those 24 hours, they're going to tell you, just because you get 4 eggs does not mean that you're going to end up with 4 eggs. Remember, you are going to lose about 50 to 75% of those eggs. So you have to start up with a strong number. So at 4 eggs in 24 hours, they're going to call you to let you know how many of those eggs were mature and how many of them fertilized. So they called me in 24 hours, and they told me 3 of those eggs have been successfully fertilized with my husband's sperm. And so I've lost 1 egg. And you think that's the end? No. At that point, when sperm fertilizes with egg, you've made an embryo. Your embryo needs to make it to at least day 5 for them to be able to put it back inside of you. So on day 3, they will call you to let you know how your embryo is proceeding. Now, before I get to that, I forgot to talk about something very, very important. At my last ultrasound, before I get into that, when you do IVF, you have 2 options for transfer. You can have a fresh transfer, which means that they will transfer your embryos in the same cycle. That means that 5 days after your egg retrieval, they will transfer the embryo back inside of you. That is a fresh transfer, and that is what I wanted to do. Then the alternative is a frozen transfer. That means they'll freeze your embryos. Maybe your body needs to rest because your body has been through a lot. Maybe they need to do some testing on the embryo, and then you would then come for the transfer maybe in a month's time or 2 months time, whenever it is that your body is ready and you're ready to do the transfer. We wanted a fresh transfer. So when we did my last ultrasound, they found some fluids inside of me, and based off of those fluids, I was not eligible for a fresh transfer. The ultrasound technician had found these fluids, and I was not eligible for a fresh transfer. These fluids were, I think, in my uterus or something. If you do a transfer with the fluid inside of you, you will not be able to, it wasn't my fallopian tube, the only fallopian tube I had left. If you did a transfer, there was an high chance that your baby will not stick inside of you. The baby needs to stick inside of you. There was a high chance the baby will not stick inside of you. So it's very advised that when they find those fluids, they pause on the transfer and let you do a frozen embryo transfer instead. So my doctor called me and said, this is a tough one because we found these fluids and the statistics don't look good. But she said, the ultrasound person that found these fluids, I believe her because she's seeing it on the screen. But I also believe Dr. S. Dr. S operated on you 2 months ago. He's my friend and he's a good surgeon. And he told me that your fallopian tube is, the left fallopian tube, the only one you have left, is fine and that it is good. So now this is a battle of Dr. S's report versus what we can see on the screen. And because of the relationship that my fertility doctor had with my surgeon, because of how close they were and the fact that they went to the same school, she was very confident of his ability and his expertise. She said, let's ignore the ultrasound. My recommendation is that we go ahead with the transfer. And I was like, I don't want to have a transfer and then lose the baby. She said it's my decision, but she believes Dr. S. So now we were about to believe Dr. S's eyes over what we could see. And I remember calling my mom and I said, this is what is going on. My mom said, go ahead with the transfer. But all this while, we still at least need to know there's something to transfer. On day 3, they called me from the lab to tell me that 3 of my embryos were still growing. And so therefore, I should come back on day 5. We're going to go forward with the transfer. On day 5, we went to the hospital. They told me that right now, 2 of the embryos have grown and they are good, but 1 of the embryo is slowing down. It's not growing the way they want it to grow. They're going to give that embryo 2 more days to grow. If that embryo does not grow in 2 days, then we're going to lose that embryo, and which is what we've been expecting. They told us we're going to get just 1 embryo, and they've also told us that you lose 50 to 75% of your embryos, of what you start with. We started with 4. Right now we had lost 25%. We had lost 1 embryo. So we were 3 left, 2 good, 1 not good. Now in Canada, they do not transfer twins if you're under 35. So the option of transferring 2 embryos did not exist. So we transferred 1 embryo on day 5. They said they'll call me to let me know how my the other embryos are doing. 1 of them was doing well, the other one was not doing well. So we transferred the embryo that was doing the best looking embryo. 2 days later, they called me and they said, congratulations, your 2 embryos grew. So we're going to freeze them. So I started with 4 eggs and I ended up with 3 embryos. Not the statistics. God said he's gonna show off, because I was supposed to lose 50 to 75% and I lost 25%. So they have froze my remaining 2 embryos. So we did the transfer. You have to wait for 2 weeks to find out if you're pregnant. Those 2 weeks were the hardest wait of my life. And in those 2 weeks, you're taking something called PIO shots. I'll attach a picture of the needle here. That is the most brutal injection I've ever received in my life. I had to take a PIO shot every single day for 10 to 12 weeks if the pregnancy was going to be successful. And so I was taking down my bum every single day, not knowing if I was pregnant, but praying and hoping that I was pregnant. My husband's birthday was coming up, and I remember telling God, please let this be his birthday present. Let this be our birthday present. Let this be our birthday present. And so one day I took a test. I took a pregnancy test about, I think, 5 days after the transfer. I was supposed to wait for 14 days, but man, it's not easy. So I took a test 5 days after the transfer, and there was the faintest line on that test. In fact, when I took a picture, the line did not show up. And I thought I was losing my mind. I had taken so many tests. I said, is this a positive? But I thought I was losing my mind. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't say anything. The next day, I took a digital test to find out if I was pregnant. The digital test came out as negative. I wasn't pregnant. So I said, okay, you know, like, we have 2 more embryos. This didn't work. Maybe the remaining 2 will work. The next day, which was the day before my husband's birthday, I took a test in the morning, and I still saw, this time around, I saw a second line, and that second line was clearer than the first one. So it was there, but I was like, is it possible? And then I took a digital test in the afternoon. And I got a yes. I was pregnant. I was pregnant. I got a yes. And I told my husband, and we just hugged each other. And we were like, God did it. God did it. And then I told my sisters and my mom and some of my best friends, and they were so excited. And then we had to wait for like another 6 days to do the blood tests, because all of that stuff doesn't matter. I kept taking a test every single day because I could not believe that I was pregnant. I could not believe that it would work. And took a test every single day, and every time the line was getting darker and darker and darker, I went for my test, which we call it a beta, when you do your blood test. And I went for my blood test, and my doctor wanted it to be anything above 200, 300, and my beta was 900 and something. So my doctor was like, you're pregnant. You're certainly, most definitely pregnant. And then she said to me, your results for your IVF were stellar. We thought we were going to get 1 embryo and we got 3. This is not even doesn't make scientific sense. And I knew just right there, right then, how awesome God is and how intentional God is about me. If my fertility doctor and my surgeon did not know each other, I would not have had the transfer. And how crazy it is that the doctor in Toronto and the doctor in Vancouver went to school together. and God allowed me. Like, I wasn't able to get a date until I was matched with a doctor. And the fact that two doctors that are random in different provinces knew each other, how intentional God was and God is about me. And I just want to encourage anybody who is waiting on God to tell you not to give up. Don't give up. No matter what the report says, don't give up. No matter what any doctor tells you, don't give up. Doctors do not give children. IVF does not give children. God does. And so if you are asking God for a sign to not give up, this is it. And if you are too tired to ask God for a sign or to not give up, I'm telling you to not give up. So I am currently pregnant. I wish I could show you my stomach, but the way this is set up, I'm not sure that you would see it. But I'll post a picture of me right now. I don't know how to end this, to be honest with you, but I hope that my story is a testimony. I hope that my testimony blesses you, and I hope you know just how intentional God is about you. Do not give up. Don't give up. Don't give up on God. And don't give up on your dreams to be a mother. Don't give up on your dreams to be a father. Don't give up on your dreams to be a parent. No matter what shape or form that comes in. Thank you for watching.